minutes to refute the ambiguity of the people who say that the Prophet ﷺ was a pedophile, due to the fact that he mentioned Aisha, that he married Aisha radiallahu anha wa ardaha. It's an ambiguity that is really simple to refute. And actually, this was some information that was gathered some years ago, which Abu Khadija Abdul Wahid from Salafi Pub had helped me with years ago. He sent all this information to me. For the most part, I would give him about 90% credit for all the information he sent me. So inshallah, bi'idhnillah, that's inshallah, he also could get the reward for this, which is Jazakallahu khairan. In clarifying and refuting and nullifying the ambiguity that the kuffar has spread about the Prophet ﷺ being a pedophile. So a person, if a non-Muslim was to come to you and say this, you will know how to answer it. طيب. Number one is, just to hear, I want to hear from, what would be the answer to a person if they ask you this? The Prophet ﷺ was a pedophile because he married someone who was underage, and their eyes who was underage. I just want to hear what would be the first thing a person would say out of their mouth from my brothers here. One in the back, that's it. I'm just take one. Then I'm going to go in. Tafadhal. Nine years old. I say a 9-year-old girl. How can a grown man marry a 9-year-old girl? Now a Muslim comes to you and say that. What would you say? What is the indication she's a woman? Gee. طيب. This would be the thing you would say to a non-Muslim, right? I want something a little bit more stronger than that, though. How can a grown man marry a woman that young, or a little girl that young? That's what they'll say. You was on the right trail when you first said the first sentence, Abu Taqwa, even though you was one great. Wait, brothers, just one more. And that's it. I want to start. No, you were on the right track when you first said the first sentence. It was something that was common. Meaning what? Absolutely. Absolutely. Bang. You hit it right on the, that'll be the summarized version of the answer. The summarized version of the answer is, look to the refutations of all the enemies of Islam, of what they accused the Prophet ﷺ of, whether it be from the Yahud, the Nasara, the pagans, the polytheists, whoever hated Islam. This type of accusation was never used from none of them until almost 1,000 years later. Why? Because everybody was doing it. It was a known practice, or it was something that wasn't looked down upon. And it was known amongst that which is the non-Muslims at that time that it was acceptable in the society. Nobody looked down upon it. It was something that was known. Everybody was doing it. The Jews, the Persians, the Christians, the pagans, the fire worshippers, the Christians, the Jews, the pagans, everyone. Everyone was doing it because it was a known practice back then. It was something in the society at the time that was what? Common. It was known. Rather, it was something that was what? Honorable for a man who was of a high status to marry his daughter off young, to take my daughter in what? In marriage. Of an honorable noble man to take my daughter in what? And offer her marriage to someone that was what? Known and having status, or one that was high or acceptable in the society, or having status in the society. It was something that was what? A practice that was acceptable, but everyone was doing it. You understand? So that's what we want to talk about and inaugurate by saying. Now, firstly, we cannot say, like this issue, we can't look at it from a Eurocentric or Western orientated type of view, or point of view. Modern Western liberalism is no more than what? 100 years old. To do so would be say that other civilizations before them are inferior, which is the peak of arrogance. European history itself shows that there have been wide variations in the age of consent. We'll start from Europe, and then we're going to move to America. because we're going to talk about their laws and what their laws previously used to be. As a recent. It wasn't something that was all just 200 years ago. Something that was in this modern day 19th century, or that was in the 19th century. We'll talk about it. European history itself shows there have been wide variations in the age of consent. Now, before I deal in this information, we're not telling everyone to go out and break the law. You understand, everyone? Or break the laws of the land. I want to make that clear if the FBI or anybody's listening. So what I'm saying is, we're not telling anyone to go out and break the laws of the land, and to put themselves and subject themselves to where they will be what? Put in jail due to this. As the ulama clearly mentioned that, and they say this, if there's something that's going to cause a harm upon yourself, don't do it. Understand, everyone? Of that which is marrying a sister or a girl that's under, or in their laws, underage. You understand, everyone? Do not put yourself and subject yourself to what? Being put under the harms of the authorities, to go out and come and what? Break the law. But at the same time, don't accuse our Prophet ﷺ as something that was what? Known and practiced in the whole society, whether it be from the Jews, the Christians, and everyone. This wasn't something that was weird until modern day liberalism came along, which is no older than a butt, about maybe 100 years old. Right, everyone? Right. So traditionally across the globe, the age of consent for sexual union was a matter for the family to decide, or a tribal custom. In most cases, this coincided with signs of puberty, just like our brother just mentioned, menstruation for a woman and pubic hair for a man. So for a woman that could have been as young as 9 or 10, a clear physical sign in a woman that she's ready for sexual relations is that she's what? She starts her mens, which proves that she can what? Bear children. Right, everyone? Play it. In the 12th century, Gratian, the influential founder of canon law in medieval Europe, so we're talking about Europe now, accepted age of puberty for marriage to be between 12 and 14. 12 and 14. Acknowledged consent to be meaningful if the children were older than 7. There were authorities that said that consent could take place earlier. Marriage will what? Marriage would then be valid as long as neither of the two parties annulled the marital agreement before reaching puberty, or if they had already consummated the marriage. It should be noted that judges honor marriages based on mutual consent at ages younger than 7. That's in Europe, the non-Muslims. In spite of that which Gratian has said, in spite of what he said, there are recorded marriages of 2 and 3 years old. That's in Europe. And that was 500 years after Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So that proves marriage was common throughout what? Europe to children younger than what? Aisha. You understand, everyone? But one. Now it's moved to America, over here. The American colonies followed in the English tradition, and the law was more of a guide. For example, Mary Hathaway, Virginia, 1689, was only 9 when she married to William Sir Edward Coke. England, 17th century, made it clear that marriage of girls under 12 was normal. And that age at which a girl who was a wife was eligible for a dower from her husband's estate was 9, even though her husband be only 4 years old. 17th century. That is 1,000 years after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Understand? I'm going to get the summarized version of this, just because this will turn to an hour lecture. But at any rate, the summarized version, I'll get the detailed version next week in Baltimore. But at any rate, because it's a lot of information. So based upon that, ya ma'ashar al-ikhwa wal akhawat, to summarize everything up, it would be upon now for the non-Muslims to say that your grandfathers, your ancestors, your ancestors, your forefathers were all what? Pedophiles. And they're not willing to say that. Based upon your ideologies of that, which is a modern day liberalism, that necessitates that your grandfather, your forefathers, your grandfathers, everybody else, everyone in the whole civilization of the earth were all pedophiles. Everyone. Because the Romans were doing it, the Persians were doing it, the pagans would do it, the fire worshippers were doing it. Everybody was doing it. Why? Because it was known as something that was what? Acceptable in the society. Everybody was doing it. It was something that was not looked down upon. It was something that was known in the society that everyone was doing it. That's the reason why you never see none of the enemies of Islam They called the Prophet ﷺ a magician. They called him crazy. They called him to the end of the most dispraiseworthy thing they could say, except that which is of being a fornicator. They can never say that about him because he was always a purified man, alayhi salatu wasalam. But other than that, which was of those magicians being a liar and then to the end of it, but they never used this against him, ever. Because they were what? Everybody was doing it. So they can never say this about him, and it was never used against him until 1,000 years later, until modern day liberalism came about. And then the laws changed. So that's what we say. That's a refutation against them. To say, we're not telling people to go against the law. We're not saying to go out for our people to go out in the masjid, go break the law. But at the same time, don't accuse our Prophet ﷺ, alayhi salatu wasalam, of something which was known in the society amongst the civilization, the whole earth, as something that was acceptable and not looked down upon. Rather, it was something that was what? Considered to be the norm amongst the people. You understand, everyone? Is it clear what we're saying? There's a detailed version. I'll give that in Baltimore next week, inshallah. But that which is the summarized version, I wanted to give that. So that's what you say to a non-Muslim if he was to ask you that. Based upon, the Prophet, your Prophet, Muhammad, married a girl. Why would you marry a little girl of 9 years old? And this is what you would say to them. Back in those, if you go back to modern day liberalism, first of all, take modern day liberalism has been planted in your brain as something that's so-called the best ways of life, okay? If you think so, then go on the internet and you'll find all fawahish to the end of it being what? Legalized. But at the end of the day, if you want to let's go before modern day liberalism, right? You go before modern day liberalism, you'll find that which is during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the enemies of Islam never used this against him until this time. Why? You say to them because of what? Everybody was doing it, and it was something that was known and acceptable in the society. Because the Christians were doing it, everyone was doing it. Every single person. Persia, Rome, Christians, pagan-theists, polytheists, everyone. So that would be necessitate upon your belief in liberalism being the so-called God of your mind. That would necessitate that everyone in the whole wide world were all pedophiles. Are you ready to say that about your own grandfathers and ancestors? Okay. So that's what I'm saying. Being about the case, if it's something that we're not going to tell everyone to go out and break the law. So you're trying to say you're going to marry a girl? No, we're not going to marry and break the law. But at the same time, don't accuse our Prophet of something that was known he was doing, that everybody in the society was doing it. And let's stop there. Understand, everyone? هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت واستغفرك وأتوب إليك